The 35-day election campaign is done. It's now time for the dramatic finale. Will Anthony Albanese win and retain office? Or will the coalition defy the polls and see Peter Dutton as Prime Minister? Welcome to our election headquarters. This is Election Night Live on Sky News.
Your vote has never been more important.
It is a sliding doors moment for our nation.
We've cut people's taxes again and again.
I want to be the Prime Minister that restores the dream of home ownership.
They've got to find $600 billion for their nuclear fantasy.
Labor's attacks are built on a lie.
Welcome to the first leaders' debate of the election campaign.
The People's Forum is a really important part of the Australian political landscape.
People are hurting now. We want to provide support immediately.
What are you going to cut to pay for it?
The Prime Minister, for goodness sake, lies about falling off a stage.
He verbaled the President of Indonesia.
Do I think that the coalition can win? Absolutely I do. We can and we must.
There is only one choice: building Australia's future together.
This is Election Night Live on Sky News. Now your host, Chief News Anchor, Kieran Gilbert.
There is now just under 1 hour till the polls close across the East Coast. 1 hour left in this critical contest for 18 million Australian voters and so many more around this nation. Our rolling, unrivalled coverage will bring you those voter verdicts first and give you access to the best lineup in politics in Australia tonight. Thank you all for being here. Barnaby Joyce, the former Deputy Prime Minister, Liberal frontbencher Sarah Henderson, my colleagues Chris Uhlmann, Peter Credlin, Andrew Clennell. It's great to have you all here. Labor frontbencher, Cabinet Minister Murray Watt, and former Defence Minister Joel Fitzgibbon. It is the best lineup. I'm happy to be with you all this evening. It's going to be a lot of fun. More fun for one side than others. Then the other, we'll see how the results go. Peter Credlin, first to you. What are your thoughts as we kick off our coverage this evening?
Well, I think if anyone says they know what's happening tonight, they're kidding themselves. I think it's going to be a bit of a wild ride, and I think it's 150 different individual contests. I think if the Prime Minister doesn't have a majority win here, he hasn't had a victory. And I think to come out of this with minority government after one term is no win. That's a lie and buy outcome. So this will be the test for Labor.
Andrew Clennell, what's your opening thoughts?
Well, I think Labor will probably win, will probably fall just short of a majority, probably around 75. I've been told today they might lose a handful of seats, but they'll pick up a couple, and they're not being helped in Victoria in terms of Menzies and Deakin, with news breaking the Greens are putting an open ticket on preferences there. They were two they were hoping to pick up. I will tell you, though, I have been told by various senior Labor people there is a shock result in the wings. And my tip is it could be the seat of Bean in the ACT. There's an independent running there, and there's a chance that Labor could lose that seat. So that wouldn't be very helpful at all when they're trying to get to that magic 76 majority number.
No, that's true, and Climate 200 have put some resources into that. That's a good tip. We'll keep an eye on that one. Murray Watt, as Cabinet Minister and the most senior member of the government on our panel tonight, what is your mood like? Do you think you will get that majority?
I'm very hopeful that Labor will remain in government. I think the result will be fairly similar to what we've got at the moment. Of course, I want to see a narrow majority in Labor's favour, but I'm feeling pretty hopeful about a Labor government being returned. I think, you know, the reality is the coalition have had a terrible campaign and have exposed to Australians that they're just not ready to govern, and I think we'll see that reflected in the result tonight.
Sarah Henderson, the Liberal Party had its hopes up for Victoria, your home state, and the discontent really for the state government there. It is on the nose. Will your state deliver enough seats to see you go close tonight?
Well, Kieran, we're very much hoping so, and I just take issue with what Murray just said, because he hasn't been on the ground, particularly in Victoria, where there is a great deal of anger. And the ground game in Victorian seats like Hawke and Corangamite, McEwen, Kooyong, Monash, right across the state is very, very strong, the best campaigns I've ever seen. I think we are going to see some very big surprises tonight. I am hoping for a victory. I know what the polls are saying, but when you go to the polling booths on pre-poll, there is so much anger. I can see swings left, right and centre. So I'm very, very hopeful. And for those who are yet to vote, of course, it's still only 5 o'clock. The polls are still open. I would say, please vote Liberal, vote National, and let's get Australia back on track.
Barnaby Joyce, Sarah alluded to there, the cost of living and the pressures people have been under have been so real. But has the coalition done enough with that discontent to win tonight?
I think where we have to start from is in everything you get candidates disease, you get party disease, and the party disease, candidate disease is when you say, well, this time is going to be the second time in 100 years. The reality is it's incredibly hard. It's only happened once, Scullin, 29 to 32, and he ran into 30% unemployment and the Great Depression. What we really need to see is this is a process, how the Australian people react. The Australian people are incredibly decent. They've given every government since 1932 a second go at it. And I think we need to really drill down into the minutiae of exactly what's happening, booths and areas, and it's going to be an interesting night, but I think the polls are giving us a fair indication of where it is. I'm not going to sit here and lie to people and go, oh, you know, the thing will be vastly different. I don't. But I think that the Labor Party will probably take from this too much and misunderstand the actual tenor on the ground. And from what I see, cost of living is killing people. And they're looking for an answer. And if they don't get it this time, by gosh, they'll get it the next.
Joel Fitzgibbon, your stomping ground, where you're born and bred, it's been a big focus, this campaign. Give us a sense of how you see those seats in that area playing.
Look, I think, notwithstanding all the unpredictability tonight, the Hunter is pretty predictable. I think we'll hold all the seats there. I'm not counting Barnaby, he's a little bit further north these days.
Going south.
As much as I'd love to.
I'm coming down
as much as I'd love to. Patterson's the outlier. Patterson's a real challenge. Got an amazing federal member there in Meryl Swanson, but she came out of the redistribution badly. She's sitting on about 2.8%. The offshore wind farm proposal is a big issue.
Disaster.
For her in Port Stephens, and she has the Mayor of Maitland, a popularly elected Mayor of Maitland, the biggest city in the electorate, running as an independent. And you know how much primary vote he gets, where he takes it, where it comes from, and where it goes after he exhausts, he will get knocked out. Nobody knows, and I'm absolutely with Peter on one thing. Those who are calling this election tonight, one way or the other, are just flipping the coin, hoping to look like a hero tomorrow. It's a 50-50 proposition, so it's not a bad bet. But there are only two outcomes tonight. It's either a Labor majority or a Labor minority. Hopefully by tomorrow morning we will know which it is.
Yep. Well, Chris Uhlmann, great to have you on the program and on our panel tonight. Something you and I have discussed throughout the campaign is the backdrop of Donald Trump. Not mentioned every day, but it's certainly been a presence that's affected the campaign in quite a big way.
Yeah, and we've seen in Canada that it had a big effect on the campaign there. I think less of an effect here, but still an effect. And you could tell in that because the way to follow this is to follow the rhetoric of the Labor Party and the Greens and everybody else. If they're saying that you're Trumpian or you're a bit Trump-like or you're very American in your style of politics, they're sending one message and one message only, and that's because that Donald Trump does unsettle people. But look, there is, as Joel says, there's only one outcome in terms of government tonight. That's an Albanese Labor government being returned. Now, whether it's a majority or minority will be the big question. And the big question for the Liberal Party is, can they get over 65 seats and get back into a position where they might be competitive next time around? Because, you know, they've gone backwards since day one of this campaign. They started going backwards before this campaign. Peter Credlin said at the outset this would be a very important campaign. Well, they blew it. And they blew it in every single week. I don't think there was a single day that you could say that the Liberal Party won this campaign. So there's going to be a very big going over what happened on the other side of this campaign. But if Peter Dutton can get beyond 65, 66, 67 seats, then I think you'd count that he's been very lucky to get there.
Well, we'll look at the campaign in more detail and we'll look at the numbers as they come through. But there have been comparisons made, Peter, with the Abbott campaigns. And I want to get your reflections on this, because what are the key differences between the successful Abbott approach across a couple of campaigns versus this campaign where there was a lot of material released late in the piece?
Well, I remember in 2010, of course, we ended up with a hung parliament there. We had 73 seats. Labor had 72. There were 5 independents. The crossbench is much bigger. That's the first point. We lost the negotiation, and I'd say, you know, if Peter Dutton was to get into a minority position tonight, he would lose the negotiation again, given the nature of the crossbench. But people forget Abbott was only elected leader in December 2009, and within 6 months we were in a campaign. So we had to work hard that summer, put the policies out there, and you cannot take policy change to the electorate even months out from a campaign. You've really got to socialise things. Now, I think it's faster and harder to do that now than it was then. I think that's the challenge for government, for oppositions going forward. Argue the stuff for 3 years. You know, have it so front of mind for people that they're bored with the content as they walk in to vote. You cannot introduce it in a campaign.
Well, and particularly when one of the policies, and I've spoken to many pollsters who are saying they did not focus group that policy on working from home, because if they did, it would have blown up.
It didn't need to come out though then, right? You put your costings
Could have
out
done
on a
6 months out.
Thursday. On a Thursday, your costings come out. It's a measure of costing. It's subject to EBAs and flexible arrangements anyway. So the ask, you know, that the quantum of staff in terms of the costing is hard to quantify, but it did not need to come out weeks and weeks early.
Look, the thing that sort of struck me about this campaign, and particularly for someone like Peter Dutton, is they didn't look confident in what they wanted to say. They're basically trying to straddle between teal electorates and all the way out to the regions, and so they couldn't work out a line that they thought would work their way through that. And so Peter Dutton lost the one strength that he had, and that's by being decisive. And that's about the only equity he had in the basket, because there was nothing else going for him. So.
Message clarity is key, right?
Yeah.
And you're right.
This is absolutely right. I mean, I just feel all the way through there was a lack of confidence. It was almost like they were putting policy out there and then running away from it. They announced the nuclear plan. I went to that press conference. What's the cost? I will tell you later. Then they don't have a second or third press conference or visit to a site or anything. I mean, no biggie, just the biggest energy policy change in Australia's history. But let's have one press conference and then hide away from it for 2 months. I mean, I sort of see 4 or 5 areas where they fell down in the campaign. One was the Trump issue. They kept sort of leaning into that. Work from home, nuclear, didn't sell it enough, didn't get policy out early enough, failure to support the tax cuts so that they couldn't say we're the party of lower taxes. And then, unfortunately, Peter Dutton himself, he emerged as an unpopular figure, particularly amongst women. So they are fighting a lot. I don't think they'll get to 65. I know that is the most optimistic spin the Liberal Party's putting out, and good luck to them if they get there tonight. But I can't see it. I think it's more likely they'll be in the early 60s if they're lucky.
I think we've got to have some focus though on the government, right? So the government gets in with a majority +1. They've spent like no one's spent in the last 3 years. Where is their win out of tonight? I mean, if the government is reduced to minority, after one term, they couldn't sell their term. I mean, their whole election campaign was built on attacks on the opposition. You'd expect a fair amount of that, but you should be able to sell a legacy after 3 years.
Let's hear from...
Yeah, I mean, I think that most Australians acknowledge that the last couple of years have been very difficult internationally in terms of cost of living, inflation. It's not as only Australia that's been going through inflation
but
challenges.
We're worse than everyone.
Well,
way worse
you
than
and I
everyone.
both know this depends how you measure it.
No. This is OECD.
But what Australians
data.
have also seen is this government focused relentlessly on cost of living pressures and taking action to relieve it, and they've seen an opposition that had absolutely no solutions for those pressures.
Yeah, but
in fact,
Murray,
one of the most
handing out
expensive
money,
energy
handing out
source as
money
possible.
isn't reform, right? Really easy to buy an election because you're just giving us our money back.
It's a bit early in the night to be starting to blame the opposition
I'm just being
for
blunt,
the result.
handouts aren't reform.
Well, reform is remodelling our tax system to make it more equitable for lower middle income earners rather than providing massive tax cuts to the wealthiest people in the community. That's what we did.
Well, they were legislated cuts.
And we were brave enough to go to the Australian people and say we thought that needed to change. We've done it, and now, of course, people have an opportunity to say something about that. You know, we've of course promised an additional tax cut in the most recent budget that, bizarrely, we have a Liberal Party leader saying he will repeal. So he's actually standing for higher taxes. But my point is that I think Australians do recognise the last few years have been difficult, whether it be under the Morrison government through COVID, whether it be under us through global inflation, and they've seen us talk over and over again about what we're going to do to deal with those cost of living pressures, and they're still looking for answers from Peter Dutton about what he's going to do because he's busy playing culture wars.
You're exacerbating the cost of living pressures. You can't just say, I'm going to fix a problem by giving you some of your own money back. That's not fixing a problem. You have to look into the energy sector. I believe the cost of living is the big issue at this election. It's going to be the big one at the next one. And if you look at things like the power and this sort of incessant belief in intermittent power, we know that in areas in the Hunter Valley or New England, the intermittent power, your renewables are a massive vote loser. In our areas, nuclear, I'm happy to sell nuclear power. It's a vote winner for me. People want the investment. But I tell you the one thing, you're not going to be able to fix the cost of living unless you fundamentally deal with things such as baseload power and the delivery of affordable power onto the grid, because it underlies everything. You can give people as much of their money back as you want. In the end, giving them their own money back stops, and they're going to say, what is your structural change that makes a difference.
But wasn't the problem that the coalition's answer to the energy issue was the most expensive source of energy?
But no, that was a lie. That was a lie because...
Have a look at what the CSIRO
That was a lie. A lie. It wasn't the truth.
And can I also just make...
let me
Sorry.
please. No, we are re-prosecuting the election campaign, right? We're getting into the policy minutiae. The point Peter was making is that minority government is not a win for Albanese. I'll put it a different way. Despite the opposition's terrible campaign, I mean, worse since John Hewson's campaign in '93, in my view, Labor, it seems, we don't know yet, hasn't lifted its primary vote maybe above 33.
Gillard was pillory in 2010.
OK, let me finish, please. So that's the point you should be making. Despite how badly the coalition has performed, Labor still hasn't lifted its primary vote. Maybe, we'll see by the end of the night, about 33, 34%. I'll just make 2 points about that. I agree with Murray. I mean, incumbents all around the world have suffered at the hands of cost of living, and Trump obviously disrupted that a bit, but that's basically true. And you have a look at the coalition primary vote, it's struggling to get above 35% too, so it's a structural problem for both of the major parties.
We will continue our discussion on that, and I want to get back to nuclear as well and get the thoughts of Sarah Henderson on that too. Did they not lean in enough on the big policy? Our chief election analyst, Tom Connell, is getting ready to bring you the first key results in an hour or so. He joins us live in the studio. Tom, what seats will the coalition be eyeing off as they try to make enough gains to form at least minority government?
They'll be eyeing off a few and they'll need a few. Why is that? Let's look at where things begin. This is the state of the House pre-election. So Labor 78, the Coalition 56. This tells you two things. Labor, a very tenuous hold on majority. If they lose 3, they're effectively in minority. That's in a net sense. Also, how does the Coalition make this a contest? If they can win a net 11 seats off Labor, they're effectively equal. So that's the other thing we'll look for, who's leading that seat count as it unfolds. As to where they'll be looking, well, ground zero at this election is set to be Victoria. So let's have a look at some of these seats that could be going the way, and these are the 2022 stats that could be going the way of the coalition if we see these big swings. So McEwen, 3.3%. This is the outer suburbs. I'll certainly be targeting that. We're getting a little bit closer. Now, these are big margins, but the west of Melbourne in particular is where Labor will be vulnerable. Hawke, 7.6%. Gordon's a big margin. It seems a stretch, but it's certainly been somewhere that Peter Dutton has campaigned. Go to the southeast as well, which is also interesting. 6.3%. Dunkley, a Liberal seat not that long ago, and Bruce as well. This margin, by the way, is a bit lower after the redistribution. So these were the 2022 results. Aston as well, and Chisholm. So Aston is blue there, it's red after that by-election. So obviously a lot to go after there in Victoria. In New South Wales as well, when we go there, if this button will eventually work for me, a bit of an ominous sign, isn't it? In the west of Sydney is often where we see a lot. There's not actually that much up for grabs this time. Werriwa, we saw Peter Dutton launch his campaign there. Bennelong is actually a better margin. It's a swing to hold for Labor, so that's certainly a chance. Reid as well. But the Hunter could be another hunting ground. So Hunter itself, that seat, Dan Ripicoli trying to hold that particular challenge off at the moment. Someone might be trying to fix my issue in there because they've just popped me out. You know, I'm just hoping all these issues are happening before we actually get on air. So Hunter, when we look at that, bit more than that current margin at about 5%. What's interesting there is a One Nation vote. Will that be picked up and help the National Party get that seat? Patterson and Robertson up for grabs as well. The other interesting area we'll have to look at as well, where we looked at last time, where Labor just got, of course, its majority, Perth, in and around there. Tangney, Curtin, obviously, it's trying to win, and there are other teal seats I could have mentioned in Melbourne and Sydney, and then as well the seat here of Bullwinkle, if I go a little further out, which is actually a new seat, so that's why it's not showing up. So here's Bullwinkle here. In that figure there. So that's one that's a brand new seat and Labor notionally holds by 3.3%.
Tom, while Labor is on the defence in many of those seats, it's also got its eye on making a few gains to offset the losses.
Yeah, it does. So it needs to. Let's start off in Tasmania. It could actually be quite a relevant state this time, Tasmania, because 3 of these seats are up for grabs. Now, Labor has to hold on to Lyons. That looks like a pretty small margin. Bridget Archer running there again, so Labor's confident it can certainly run her close. Braddon looks big. Labor had some candidate issues last time, and the Liberal Party candidate is stepping down, so it's a big swing needed of 8%. But these are all seen as right in play. So 3 out of 5 of the Tasmanian seats seen as in play there. Victoria, whilst this could be very much difficult for Labor, we're not ruling out this being... there's a couple of seats in particular they've targeted because they got 2 so close last time. Menzies and Deakin. You can see those margins. Menzies, again, has had a redistribution that's made it notionally Labor. In other words, the Liberal Party needs a little swing just to hold on to it. So whilst Labor's mainly on the defensive in Victoria, these eastern Melbourne seats are also ones that have attracted their attention. And here's the really interesting part. This has come into campaign focus in the past few weeks. Queensland. First of all, because of these seats the Greens hold right now. Labor has its eye on Brisbane, which the LNP held. Now it wants to win it off the Greens, and it has its eye on winning back Griffith. Also, though, Bonner has increasingly been spoken about, an LNP seat just outside, so they feel as though these demographics are relatively friendly for them. We can go up as well in far north Queensland to the seat of Leichhardt. You can see there 3.4%. You've got Warren Entsch stepping down from that seat as well. The West is where Labor will have to defend, as I said. So if we're looking like Labor is hanging on and maybe even trying to get that majority, the West is where their vote needs to hold up to make sure that happens. We'll be tracking the vote through the evening, Kieran. The other thing we'll be looking at is this electoral pendulum. So obviously this is the seat-by-seat battle I've been taking you through, but it's also about the overall number, and this is usually a pretty good guide. So this is where we are now. You can see it's deep red, that's a Labor majority. If we're seeing a small swing, this is what you could call a workable minority for Labor, as long as it doesn't get too big. This will be, negotiations begin, who knows, days and days of counting. And this light blue, once we're seeing a swing of closer to 4%, will be where we'd think the coalition could begin to form some form of government. They need a very big swing, for a uniform swing at least, to be any chance of majority. So a lot to dissect. We're looking forward to those numbers finally coming in after the long wait.
Yes, indeed, it has been, Tom. Thank you. Across the nation, the final votes are right now being cast in an array of critical contests that will prove make or break for both parties' path to power. Our Sky News team have all the battlegrounds covered. Peter Stefanovic in Queensland, Ross Greenwood in Werriwa, Ashley Gillen in Curtin, Matt Cunningham in Solomon, Georgie Dickerson in Goldstein, and Jack Nyhoff in Franklin. First, let's go to Pete in Griffith. Pete Stefanovic and Max Chandler-Mather. He won it off Labor, snatched it at the last election in a shock swing, really. This is one of 3 Brisbane seats the Greens are hoping to retain.
Yeah, and you'll remember, Kieran, that it was one of the storylines for the last federal election back in 2022, the fact that the Greens swept through these 3 inner Brisbane city seats alongside the Brisbane River. Will they go as well again? Are they the force they were 3 years ago? Some disagree with that. Looking at the state election here in Queensland last time, the Greens actually went backwards, which is energising some of the Greens' opponents tonight. But if we're breaking the seats up, we'll start with Griffith. Used to be Kevin Rudd's seat. You mentioned Max Chandler-Mather. He's certainly one of the highest profile members for the Greens this time. He's got Griffith by a fairly significant margin of 10%. But talking to the Labor candidate Renee Coffey during the week, and she seems to think that that was an anomaly. So Griffith is probably going to come down to those two. Moving across to Brisbane, which encompasses the Brisbane CBD, this is legitimately going to be a 3-horse race between Labor, the Liberal Party and the Greens. The Greens currently have it by a shade less than 4%. But Trevor Evans, we might remember him, a lot of our viewers will remember him as one of Scott Morrison's men. He lost Brisbane 3 years ago. He wants it back again, so we'll see how that one goes. Labor fancies themselves big time in the seat of Brisbane. And just rounding out the trilogy now, it's the seat of Ryan. The coalition is actually favoured to pick up Ryan. Again, obviously held by the Greens, but this is the thinnest margin of all 3 at less than 3%. So, I mean, going by that trend, you're possibly, Kieran, looking at the 3 major parties picking up 1 each. The Greens won, the Coalition won and Labor won. But, you know, as we know, things can change.
Thank you, Pete. It's often said if you can swing Sydney's west, you can win a federal election. Ross Greenwood is in traditional Labor heartland in Werriwa. Ross, changing demographics, though, suggests Labor's grip on that seat is not what it once was.
No, that's true. Remember that this is, as you say, Labor heartland. This is Gough Whitlam's old seat, Werriwa. It's also the seat that Mark Latham, the Labor leader, also held. And so this is really the working class of Sydney. But the fact of the matter is that migration, significant migration, and also huge new housing estates in this area have changed the demographics. And so there's also been redistributions. Anne Stanley has held this seat since 2016. So she now has a 5.3% majority. Now, it's fairly comfortable, but it's not completely comfortable, and that's why it's going to be fascinating to see. Just a little trend I've picked up just speaking with people here is the pre-polling has been enormous, and I wonder whether we're seeing that in other seats as well. Here at the Carnes Hill Community Centre yesterday, 4,000 people voted, but here on election day today, just a little over 1,000 people have voted. So that's a little trend to pick up. We may not see necessarily all of the votes until later this week.
Ross, thanks. Let's head out to WA where we find Ashley Gillan. Ash, many seats likely to change hands there. I know there's been an intense focus on the Teal-held seat of Curtin.
Yes, the Liberals certainly hoping that this seat of Curtin is one that will change hands tonight. But for everyone playing along at home, the other couple of seats I'm really looking at tonight here in Western Australia is Tangney, that is Labor's most marginal seat in WA, and also Bullwinkle, a three-cornered contest in that newly created seat at this election. Also on my radar tonight, Pearce, Moore, Forrest and also Fremantle. Those last three seats all have Teal candidates in them. I'm very keen to see just how those independent challenges are eating into the votes of the major parties and how the preferences are impacted by that as well. Of course, here in the seat of Curtin and in Western Australia, the only incumbent independent and the most high profile is Kate Chaney in this seat of Curtin. She joins us here. We're at the Rosalie Primary School voting booth. Kate Chaney, really appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much.
Good to be here, Ash.
This seat of Curtin has had a bucket load of money thrown at it during the campaign period from your side as well as Tom White for the Liberal Party. How confident are you can hold on to it tonight?
Ash, I'm sure it's going to be close here in Curtin. I think no one should ever take a seat for granted and it will come down to the line. But I'm really, really proud of the campaign that we've run, which has been positive and which is focused on the message that people do have an alternative to the two-party system and they can have someone who's accountable to them.
The last couple of days, the focus has been on the Labor Party and whether or not there's been a deal with you. The Labor Party has been accused of running dead in the seat of Curtin to help you out, essentially. Have you done any deals with the Labor Party? Has that impacted your chances?
Yeah, look, I've done no deals with any political parties. That's the whole point of being independent. And unfortunately, there's no ban on lies and political ads, so there's nothing that we can do about that. There's no, there is no deal, but we will get these personal attacks, this sort of stuff we're getting from behind as well. This is what the Liberal campaign is. It's all about personal attacks instead of actually focusing on policy and on the issues that people care about. And people again and again say to me at the polling stations that they're appalled by the sheer volume of attack ads, and it just shows that there's nothing else there.
Kate Chaney, really appreciate you making the time. Thank you. We'll go and break this up between the volunteers behind us. Like Ross said, look, there are volunteers probably 20 to 1 in this seat, in this voting booth, I'd say, Kieran. It's ghostly quiet here. No voters to be seen. But back to you for now.
Yeah, we don't want to clash in Cottesloe. That'd be unheard of, wouldn't it? Thanks, Ash. Let's go to Matt Cunningham in the seat of Solomon in Darwin. Matt, Labor's held this seat since 2016. Why is the coalition confident this time?
Yeah, well, you'd have to think with an 8.4% margin that Labor's Luke Gosling is absolutely the favourite to hold on, Kieran, but there are some real local issues at play in the seat of Solomon, in particular the issue of law and order. We know cost of living is the #1 issue across the country, but I think it could be argued that here in the Northern Territory and in Darwin, law and order probably trumps cost of living. We know it's a territory government or a state and territory government issue, but it is still front of mind for a lot of people here. I might just bring in the Country Liberal Party candidate, Lisa Bayliss. Lisa, thanks so much for your time. What's the mood been out on the doors today?
Yeah, look, crime is still the #1 issue in the Northern Territory, followed by cost of living. Territorians are doing it tough out there, not only just for how they're living with expenses, everyday expenses, but just also the high crime levels. So that's been, when I speak to people, still the #1 issue.
Traditionally an issue that is handled by state and territory governments. I mean, what could a federal coalition government do to make any difference here?
Yeah, look, I said it when earlier debates I've spoken to people on the street. The 7-point plan that Leah Finocchiaro, the Chief Minister, put to the federal government, and they've not actually endorsed anyone except for one. And we need real practical measures to do anything we can to try and combat crime. So I think be able to work together with Leah Finocchiaro and the rest of the Northern Territory government to try and get the best we can for the Territory.
Well, thanks so much for your time, Lisa. We've got about an hour till polls close in the Northern Territory, so I'll let you get back to it. It is a really interesting seat, Kieran, and I think it's interesting, that issue of law and order. Also interesting, we hear Lisa Bayliss there talking about trying to work with Leah Finocchiaro. She only came to power last August, but when she did, there was an absolute landslide win for the Country Liberal Party, particularly here in Darwin and Palmerston, where the seat of Solomon lies. Labor lost every one of its seats at that election. If that transpired here, they'd be out on their ear, but I think there might also be different federal issues that people are talking about today.
Yeah, and there's that teal effect as well. I know you've been telling me about it, and our viewers over recent weeks will keep an eye on that as well. Another place where the teal impact has been huge, of course, Zoe Daniel won in Goldstein last election. Georgie Dickinson is in the seat of Goldstein, and the Liberals are banking on Tim Wilson making a return in this seat.
They certainly are, Kieran, and he certainly hopes that he's done enough. He says he has been non-stop campaigning since his loss at the last election. And one of the people standing in his way of winning at the seat of Goldstein is the current member, Zoe Daniel, and she joins me now. Thank you for your time. Zoe, do you think that you've done enough to win back this seat for a second term?
I think we've done absolutely everything that we could, not only achievements for the local community and in the parliament, but also with the incredible volunteer campaign that we've run. We've had more than 1,000 people out in the field today. We've had 1,000 shifts across the booths, incredibly positive energy from voters, and I'm just so grateful to my team for all the work they've put in.
You've told me cost of living is one of the key issues on voters' minds. How will you enact change to ensure that people are better off?
Look, I think we need to electrify housing for starters, so we need to enable people to do that, to bring their energy bills down. I also strongly believe that we should be increasing JobSeeker to enable people who are living in poverty, and I have a really strong and forceful policy around universal childcare because I know for a lot of families in my electorate, childcare is the second highest cost after the mortgage. So low cost, universal, high quality care is a really key policy area for me. And if I'm elected, I'll be pushing that.
Certainly going to be a tight race tonight. Thanks so much for your time, Zoe. So, Kieran, that is the seat of Goldstein. It is going to be an extremely tight one that could come down to just a handful of votes.
Absolutely, Georgie, that's for sure. In Tasmania too, Climate 200 is backing a candidate against a Labor minister for the first time. Jack Nyhoff is live in Franklin. Jack, it's been a safe Labor seat for many years. What's different this election?
Climate 200 backs candidates who campaign strongly on climate change and environmental issues. Out of the 35 candidates that have backed this election, 4 are challenging Labor incumbents, including here in Franklin. Peter George, he's an independent. He's looking to narrow that margin that Labor holds this seat. It's around 13%. His strong power is his stance on environmental issues, including the controversial issue of salmon farming in the state. There's been protests against this. Many say that it threatens native wildlife, including an endangered skink. Others say that it threatens and pollutes waterways as well. Now, just before the election, Labor, with the backing of the coalition, passed legislation that protected jobs at Macquarie Point to protect that industry. It's a huge employer here in Tasmania, hugely important for the economy as well. So we could see voters taking a stance on that issue and changing their votes this time around. Also in the neighbouring electorate of Lyons is one to watch. That margin very slim, just 0.9%. There's been a change of the Labor candidate there. Rebecca White is looking to challenge it for the first time for Labor. She's a former opposition leader, she failed to bring the opposition to government on a state level. She's looking to protect that seat. Susie Bowers has slimmed that margin at the next election. She's looking to make that slimming a trend and finally claim that victory this time around. Kieran, no matter what happens tonight, Tasmania will play a big role in deciding Australia's future.
Indeed, Jack, thank you. Thank you all. Our reporters will be back out into the field in just a moment. I want to go live now to Richo, Graham Richardson, former Labor Minister and my Sky News colleague. Richo, we've been talking a lot during the campaign. You've been increasingly confident. What's your read tonight as we await the close of polls?
I believe that Labor will get in with a narrow majority on its own. I think the last few weeks, Labor has finished with a wet sail. I think they've done very well the last 2 weeks. I think Dutton's faded a bit, and that's not biased talking. That's because I get paid to predict accurately, not to just follow my biases. So as far as I'm concerned, Labor will get up tonight, and they should have a very narrow majority on their own right.
What would be a good performance for Peter Dutton, in your view?
Oh, well, he's got to win. That's a good performance. If he wants to keep his job, he can't stay opposition leader forever. So he needs to win, and if not win, get awfully close. And I just can't see that, Kieran. I look for a pathway for him, but it's pretty hard to find.
Do you think that he should have... we're going to get back to our panel and talk about this in a moment, but on the issue of nuclear, something like that, you announce it, should you lean in more? Should it have been a bigger part of the campaign?
No. Campaigning on nuclear things is very risky. A lot of people like it, a lot of people hate it, especially women. And so I think you get yourself into a dangerous area if you make too big a deal of your belief in nuclear power. So I think he got it about right. You can't overdo it.
OK. Richo, great to see you. We'll catch you a bit later in the coverage. Peter Dutton and Anthony Albanese have crisscrossed the nation over the course of a gruelling 35-day campaign. There have been divisive debates, policy backflips and big-ticket election sweeteners promised, often with little regard for the nation's growing debt and deficit. So before we know who won the election, let's take a quick look back at who won the campaign.
Election season is off and running.
Ready to go? Are you? Born ready.
Strap yourselves in, it's on.
Australia is going to the polls on May 3 for one of the most unpredictable elections in many years.
Off around the country to sell his message, Peter Dutton will do the same.
Our plan will deliver a stronger economy with low inflation and affordable homes in safer communities.
This election is a choice between Labor's plan to keep building or Peter Dutton's promise to cut.
The major party's offering about as attractive as a dead fish.
This is a good campaign.
Yes. Here we go. No, we don't.
No assistance here at all. Our policy will deliver cheaper energy costs. What would the power bill have done here?
It's gone up 40% over the last 3 or 4 years. So.
40%.
Your energy bills, rates going up.
It's a big struggle.
They won't come clean on costs or details because they won't come clean on their secret cuts to pay for nuclear reactors.
Today there is a backflip from the coalition regarding its work from home policy.
We got it wrong and we've apologised for it.
They don't think that you're representing them.
Look at, a lot of women who have got a micro business at home or...
Like me.
Driving home his promise to slash the fuel excise by 25 cents.
You managed on the horn there, you thought that was okay, so it's good fun.
It's his 12th visit to a petrol station so far in this campaign.
Do I get the 25-cent a litre discount yet?
Well, that's a savings immediately. What am I going to have? Oh, come on. A vote for Labor means the certainty of Medicare. This little card here, your Medicare card, your Medicare card, the Medicare card. You just need your Medicare card.
When you go to the doctor, do you have to use just your Medicare card or do you have to use your credit card as well?
You use both.
Peter hasn't been able to stand up for his own policy, so I don't know how he can stand up for Australia.
Questions about cuts.
Well, let me finish.
He's asking
Economics and business. And I tell you, the way you get through tumultuous times.
Why can't you win this election by telling the truth?
We can make Australia great again.
Is that an ode to Donald Trump?
No, if I said that, I don't even realise I said that, but no.
Any country that has treated the American people unfairly should expect to receive a tariff in return.
Tariffs are acts of economic self-harm.
Bullies don't respect weakness, and Anthony Albanese is a weak leader.
When you have choppy waters, you've got to navigate them, but you've also got to keep your eye on the horizon. I stumbled, that's what happened. I laughed about it at the time, I laughed about it since I fell for Newcastle a long time ago.
Oh, got him. Got him. Yeah. My apologies.
No, that's all right.
We'll get you beer this afternoon. Thanks.
Did you just have your bulldozer moment, as it was called for Scott Morrison?
I was expecting him to mark it. I thought for sure.
It's amazing, just the scale of it.
G'day, I'm Peter. The Coalition will be the best friend that WA's ever had.
What's going on, Albo? Henry, that's the Prime Minister.
This election is about your future, and it is about our country's future.
The difference between myself and Peter Dutton is that we have had cost of living measures.
Leaders both putting their housing policies to the test.
Plenty of work on?
Yeah, at the moment, yeah.
Yeah, that's good. My name's Peter. I'm here to help you today.
The campaign circus rolls into the Easter show. If you had to pick one in the show bag,
I think Bertie Beetle is there, but anything chocolate.
got a broken promise on the show bag here. Oh, hold on, it's inside. I wouldn't dare.
Ash is inside.
Any questions for my little friend?
Absolutely. Who are you going to vote for?
I'm going to take it back to the lodge.
Our bus is stuck. We've literally hit a bump in the road. Not the best start, you've got to say.
Both leaders have been beset by protesters.
Why are you lying to the Australian people about the cost of nuclear and gas?
Stay back, everybody. Way back.
You're a good man.
Oh, that was a good one.
I hope you win.
Is that good enough?
Let's get the thoughts of the panel on the campaign. Sarah Henderson, your view as you look back, could things have been done more effectively, more information out earlier, for example?
Well, Kieran, I'm really proud of the campaign we ran. I mean, clearly we were dealing with a very, very dire 3 years that Australians have suffered under this government. We have seen the largest fall in living standards in history. So many Australians are suffering. And what did this government do for the first 18 months? It spoke about the voice, a divisive proposal which divided Australia. They completely took their eye off the ball, and all through that time we were saying you've got to address the cost of living. And frankly, I think we did that in spades during the campaign. And while we did that, we were hit with a barrage of lies. I've been around for a while now, Kieran. I have never seen so many lies from any side of politics. The lies that we saw on nuclear costings, on health and education cuts, the lies on Medicare, basically saying that Medicare was under threat, was just absolutely laughable. The Prime Minister even lied about falling off the stage. And so I think a lot of Australians looked at the things that were being said and were saying that is not good enough. Clearly, you know, there were some hiccups during the campaign. We don't step away from that. But do you know one thing that Peter Dutton did? Particularly on the work for home policy, he admitted that there was a mistake that had been made and he fessed up to the Australian people. And we have not seen this government fess up to the Australian people about anything at all, including what I regard in this country as a massive energy crisis. And in Victoria, it's worse than anywhere else in the country. We are running out of gas.
We will talk about that at length throughout the night, but I want to ask Joel Fitzgibbon, someone else who's been around a long while, was this campaign marked by mistruths?
Well, this
Lies.
is politics, Kieran, and Sarah. You're not. The next election is 3 years away. You're not winning any or losing any votes tonight.
It's not about. It's just about telling the truth, Joel.
But you sound like you're trying to blame everyone else.
No. I'm just calling it as it is.
For what was a terrible campaign, I'm sure Peter himself would concede that, or will at some point in time. It's the worst campaign I've seen since John Hewson in 1993. That's a pretty big call. There have been a few pretty ordinary campaigns.
Bill Shorten.
But on this issue, well, Shorten was much different because he's winning most of the way, and there were a couple of hiccups, but he performed pretty well throughout the course of the campaign. But obviously those tax policies in the end killed him politically. This lies thing, I mean, we're in politics. Well, I was in politics, and of course there will be all sorts of nuance. You know, budget trajectories, for example. You can both be right. You know, if you're saying this year we're spending $10 and over the next 4 years we're going to start spending $20 a year, and then over the next 4 years you only spend $15 a year, then you're spending more, but you're spending less than you had projected to
Yeah,
spend.
hang on.
So both parties telling a different story.
You said the guy was going to abolish Medicare. Like that's
he tried to last time he was there.
Come on,
Yeah,
and your guy didn't want boat turnbacks, and he got up at national conference and said, "I want boat turnbacks." He didn't let the asylum seekers
Kieran,
in.
if I can just make one really important point. Murray, on his social media, I was so disgusted. You did a social media video saying that Peter Dutton's plan was to cut Australians' wages. Now, that was an absolute lie. Lie, Murray.
Happy to address that.
What about the
That was a lie, and all you've done,
Happy to address that.
all you've done, and I've seen many lies from you in my time in the Senate, but that was a really big one.
You haven't got parliamentary
And frankly, I don't worry. Bring it on. But what I can say is that Australians, and they were saying this to me on the polling booth, we are sick of the lies. And one thing that we saw from Peter Dutton during this campaign was conviction, courage and truth.
Well, I had a bet with my staff about how early in the night we'd see some of the Conservative commentators start blaming Labor for their loss, if it ends up being a loss. And it took about 8 minutes before we got into Labor and lying. I mean, it seems to be okay for Liberal Party politicians to accuse Labor of wanting to bring in negative gearing when we say we're not going to do that. Apparently that's not a lie. It's okay for Liberal politicians to say that we want to extend taxes on superannuation, and apparently that's not a lie.
Well, you did.
You are unrealised gains on superannuation.
Beyond the policy that we've announced, you spent a lot of the campaign convincing people that we were going to broaden that, but apparently that's not a lie. But if we want to point to Peter Dutton's record of what he actually did as the health minister,
what's the logic behind this?
That's a lie.
We think you lied, so it's all right if we lie.
Well,
you
got him back, didn't you?
The point I'm making is that
the new campaign structures will just BS one another.
if this result goes
How's
the
that
way,
gonna work?
the point I'm making is that if this result goes the way most people think it will, which is some form of Labor win, if all the Liberal and National Party do is sit back and blame Labor for their defeat rather than having any self-reflection, you are in a world of pain. You've got to have a good hard look at yourselves.
We'll walk and chew.
The worst campaign since
we'll walk and chew gum.
1993.
We'll acknowledge our
catastrophe.
We'll acknowledge our faults, and we have got them quite.
I think
absolutely.
you will, Barnaby.
But you've got to acknowledge, you can't just. You've been going around saying, "Oh, the nuclear plan is going to cost $600 billion." It's just a load of crap.
But in relation to
come
that,
from?
first of all, Peter Dutton doesn't name a cost. Second of all, he says there's 7 federal government funded. I mean, why didn't you just lift the moratorium and say, let the market decide? That would have been a smarter policy.
Why didn't they say, if all their market information is correct, they're happy to let the moratorium go? Because if they're telling the truth, then the moratorium is not needed.
I've got to say, Kieran, in terms of the campaigns, Labor were more ruthless and consistent in their message, and they had the better pictures, frankly, from a TV point of view. They were just smoother, better. They didn't hop from thing to thing. They didn't, do work from home, have to dump it, because everyone these days pretty much works from home.
Can I just say that the real test here, I think, in terms of this debate, will be how much of the primary vote the major parties share tonight.
Yeah, that's a fair call. That's fair. I think
that's the people decide whether they like this robust contest.
The big hiding issue in this is where One Nation, Jared Rennick, the Greens go, especially in the Senate. I think that's the issue. We won't get to the answer tonight, but that's going to be an issue.
That's the most disappointing part of where you launched off, Joel, because I think the reason why there's a pox on both major parties is this trading out of lying. When I started in politics in '98, people took policies to elections. You debated about the costings. It was a reform agenda debate. Labor had reforms, Libs had reforms, Nats had occasional reforms. You'd go at it in a campaign, you'd come out the other end, and the best team would generally win. Right? We got the government we deserved. I don't feel like we've got this anymore, and I feel that the lies are dragging down democracy. And I think the lies, even when the lies are called out, like your bloke was called out the other night by Phil Coorey, and then he pumped that lie out the next day and the next day and the next day. And it's debilitating to democracy.
We will continue that discussion, and not just for the next little while, right throughout the night, in fact. I'm sure it'll dominate much of our discourse, and we're now entering the final minutes of voting. There are 3 seats that will prove pivotal to the Coalition's chances tonight. Let's check in on them. For their offensive strategy, Bennelong and Gilmore are Labor's 2 most marginal seats nationwide, but the Liberals also defending marginal seats themselves, like Sturt in Adelaide. Let's get out there to these seats. Crystal Wu in Bennelong, Monique Vanderheyden in Sturt, Ruben Spargo in Gilmore. Crystal, talk us through the Bennelong contest.
Well, Karen, Labor's Jerome Laxale currently holds the seat of Bennelong, but he is considered an underdog. So he won the seat with a very slim margin. 84 votes was the margin. Now, he's been around this community for about 20 years. He served as the mayor for Top Ryde for 5 years, but now he faces a very difficult challenge, and that's because of the boundary reshuffle. The abolishment of North Sydney has given suburbs like Lane Cove and Hunters Hill to Bennelong, making the seat notionally Liberal. Liberal candidate Scott Yung, we spoke to him earlier today. He says he's confident, and it's apparent the Liberals are investing in a lot of time and energy into the seat of Bennelong. As you can tell, outside polling booths, there are 3 to 4 times as many Liberal Party volunteers as Labor volunteers. And the Liberals have also confirmed they had paid for security to ensure that there were no damages to Scott Yung pamphlets and corflutes overnight. So it is apparent the Liberal Party have invested in a lot of resources to ensure they can win back the seat once held by former Prime Minister John Howard.
Crystal, thank you. Sturt, Monique, is a must-hold, isn't it, Mon, for Peter Dutton to have any chance of forming government?
Yeah, it sure is, Kieran. Labor, though, does see themselves a real chance here in Sturt with Claire Clutterham, but it was the Greens who felt very confident heading into this campaign that they could make up significant ground here in Sturt. But really, it's the Liberals candidate, James Stephens, who must hold this seat, which was once really a Liberal stronghold held by Christopher Pyne, but now sits on a wafer-thin 0.45%. Now, James Stephens has given us a little bit of his time this afternoon, just as the polls are closing. James, how are you feeling? Do you think you've done enough?
Well, I'm very nervous, and I don't have long to wait, thankfully. But look, we've done everything we could in this campaign. Hopefully it's enough. We'll find out soon. But we've not left anything on the field. And, I'm in the hands of the good people of Sturt now.
Well, your party needs to claim back really as many seats as possible, but you need to hold on to these seats as well. Have you been feeling the pressure throughout this campaign? Those are some pretty high stakes.
Absolutely, and of course I'm the last Liberal in metropolitan Adelaide, so the stakes are very high here in the Sturt campaign. If we're losing a seat like Sturt, there's no pathway to government in my view, and I feel that pressure very, very acutely. But I'm proud of the campaign that we've run. I think we've put a very good argument to the voters to re-elect us locally and to be part of a government nationally, and we're hours away from finding out.
Thanks for your time, James. But not long now, Kieran, we should have a result, hopefully a bit later tonight.
Mon, thank you. Let's go to Ruben. And the Liberals are hoping to ride the momentum of last election's swing in Gilmore.
Kieran, Labor incumbent Fiona Phillips is facing a strong challenge from Andrew Constance, the former New South Wales Transport Minister. This seat of Gilmore here is one of the most marginal in the country, held by a razor-thin margin of just 0.2%. At the 2022 election, Fiona Phillips defeated Andrew Constance by just 373 votes. We've been speaking to voters on the ground today. The consistent sentiment has been people want change. We attempted to have a quick chat to Fiona Phillips earlier this afternoon. She declined, claiming she was busy. Andrew Constance, though, believes he can ride the momentum of the 2022 swing to victory tonight.
Thank you, Ruben. Let's get back to our panel now, and I want to get back to something we spoke to Richo about, Barnaby Joyce, the nuclear idea. Now, I love Richo, and he's a good friend, and we have him on all the time. But I disagree with him. I disagree with him to the extent that if you announce a policy that big, you've got to own it. Yeah, you've got to lean into it. And I think actually a lot of people would come along for the ride if they didn't have this vacuum that Andrew Clennell articulated earlier. You've got to put the detail in there, make the case.
Well, I think it's, first of all, down in Gilmore, one of the big issues there, once more, offshore intermittent power precincts, so-called renewables. People hate them, like they hate them in the Hunter, like they hate them in New England. Urban Australia, please hear us, we hate them. Now, what you have with nuclear, there's two ways to campaign. I've done it for a little bit, like Peter knows, 20 years. You got to create binary issues, stop the boats, repeal the carbon tax. It helps if they're already defined. You don't have to go out there and define them. The thing about nuclear is you have to explain nuclear physics and nuclear energy to one of the only countries in the Western world that doesn't use it or doesn't have it. And it's a very complicated task. So your preamble is extensive before you get into the substance of the binary issue. And because your preamble's extensive, it gives a great vulnerability for people to just come and bomb it with BS. You know, it's going to $600 billion. It's, you know, you're going to have three-headed fish and all this sort of rubbish. And that is just part of the process of what you have to deal with. I would have gone to a more binary issue of something that was already defined, you're going to belt it out of the park, and concentrate on that and challenge the Labor Party, say, seeing you believe it's all market economics as to why we don't do it, just remove the prohibitions. You don't need them anymore.
Look, I just thought they got the cart before the horse, right? What they needed to do was to define what was happening now and to remind people every single day that there was a promise that they were going to get $275 back, and then the government had to start subsidising power. This policy was self-evidently wrong from before the last election because the Labor Party hasn't taken into account at all the way that electricity is priced. Now, it's a difficult thing, right? But this modelling we keep hearing about, it's the lowest cost of energy when it's generating. It mostly doesn't generate. And so you needed to get people to understand that the system that we're building will simply never work, will always drive up the cost of electricity, and to say to them, forget the modelling, look at your bill. What does your bill tell you?
Yeah,
every single day, every single week from 100%. Every single MP needed to do that. And then they needed to say, if you want to get to net zero, which is a fanciful target, but if you want to get to net zero, there is only one energy source that delivers baseload power, and that's nuclear. So why don't we just lift the ban and have the debate? Simple as that. Lift the ban, have the debate. If people are not going to invest in it, then they won't invest in it. But do it. Just do it that way around. So I just felt that they needed to make the case against what was happening now, and there's plenty of room for that.
They wanted to name sites because they didn't want a campaign saying in every seat a nuclear power plant's going.
But I'll give you two sites. Fremantle, Sydney. That's where the nuclear subs are going. They'll be docking in ports.
I understand. I'm not trying to get a debate.
And
I'm just saying, I agree with you. I'm just saying this was the method behind the madness, or the reason behind it.
And look, it's one of the things that I applaud. At least they were thinking a little bit big. I just think in terms of the sales pitch, I would start with the very simple thing is what's there now is not working, is always going to be expensive. And they have no idea what this is going to be.
Give them the problem before the solution.
Yeah, sort of and then go to the solution.
And in the way that the PM held up the Medicare card, you know, I would have been out there every single day with my bill, my Origin Energy bill. Everyone's got one at home on the fridge. Everyone opens them up with trepidation, wondering how the heck you're going to pay them. Everyone's bill was supposed to be cheaper under that bloke, so we obviously lied. And every time we pulled the card out, I would have had a bill.
I actually used the nuclear power plant as a plus in my campaign, and we'll see how it goes in Muswellbrook. I said, I want it. I want it. Who wouldn't want $10 billion invested in Muswellbrook with all the Boilermakers, fitters and turners, electrician jobs that come in?
I would have said anyone who lives 100 k's inside a nuclear power zone gets free power for the rest of their lives.
I think all this does is underline the fact that this is not the Labor Party's fault. This is the coalition's fault in the way that it campaigned. And if you couldn't see the Medicare campaign coming for the third election in a row and hadn't worked out some way of dealing with that, well, you're not thinking. The thing that gets me about the way that this campaign was conducted, it looked like it took the coalition by surprise.
Let's hear from Joel now. Seen a few campaigns, and you've described it as the worst since Houston before we even see the numbers, which is
look, I'm not sure who said it. Might have been Peter earlier that Peter just didn't define himself. He was on the fence. Wasn't the hard man, which he's been known to be, and he didn't go far enough to the left either to compete with Labor on the left. And that was obviously a mistake, and I'm sure if he had his time again, he'd do it differently. But on nuclear generation, of course, I've always supported the lifting of the prohibition. It's crazy policy, and was a deal in the Senate on an unrelated bill a long time ago. But Dutton established nuclear power so he could say he had a pathway to net zero. And Barnaby might correct me, but I think it was a way of, convincing the Nats that they should keep
I think that's
net
right.
zero.
I think it was tail wagging the dog.
Matt Canavan has basically admitted that, saying it was a political fix.
And I suspect Peter was never really going to go out of his way to talk about it. He just did it there. So whenever he got a question on net zero or on climate change, he could say, well, there's my policy there. It's the only pathway.
Murray, just quickly if you can, we want to get to the close of polls.
But the interesting thing here is that for the first time in a long, long time, many elections, climate change wasn't really a big issue in this campaign. And that
100.
That is it's a good point. Thank you, one and all. I'm going to jump in because polls on the East Coast are about to close. So stay with us. A huge night in our nation's political history about to unfold. And this is Sky's final countdown to election 2025.
What people actually want is cost of living, energy relief. Everyone's frustrated.
Is the anger enough to flip this marginal seat?
People don't like change.
The floods left deep scars.
We're still out here struggling.
A storm's been brewing for a showdown in Cowper.
I'm struggling.
The seat of Macarthur is one the Coalition will heavily target.
This is really, of all the must-win seats,
Mackellar is the Liberals' best chance.
Everything's just gone up in triples.
It's shaping up to be a tight contest here in Goldstein.
I reckon if people know what to do what and what's going to happen.
McNamara is a significant target for the Greens.
Peter Dutton believes seats like Gilmore are fertile ground for the Coalition.
We've got some tough days ahead.
Game tic-tac-toe, Liberal, Labor.
Cost of living has been the recurring theme.
Farmers want the government to get rid of the red tape.
I don't think farmers are put on the pedestal that deserve.
The rare glimpse into the two men vying for the nation's top job.
You're watching Election Night Live on Sky News with Chief News Anchor Kieran Gilbert.